Most people don't know what actually happens when they run the wheel on a stock. What if it drops? What if it rips higher? What if it just sits there? Today, I'm going to show you every single scenario. Live options chain, real numbers on SOFI, which is sitting right around $15.75 right now. I'm going to walk you through the entry, what happens if you get assigned, what happens if it tanks, and what happens when it gets called away. Every outcome, every path. Let's get into it. So SoFi is sitting right at $15.75 right now. If we go ahead and go into the options chain itself, this will allow us to enter our first position. It's called a cash secured put, and that's exactly how you start the wheel strategy. So I'm going to choose sell put here to make sure we're selling a cash secured put. I'm going to choose the expiration that's about 8 days away. I like to stick to selling weekly expiring options. So here I'm going to scroll down below the current market price because we want to agree this to buy the stock at a lower price than where it's trading now. I'm going to choose the $14.50 strike price here. Right now, I will get paid $15 upfront for agreeing to buy the stock at $14.50 if it reaches that price by this expiration date that we chose of April 10th. So one of two things can happen with this position. Either the stock stays above my strike price of 14.5 or it goes below that. And we'll go into that in the next segment here. But basically what's happening here is I'm putting up $1,450 in capital to agree to buy 100 shares of the stock. So yes, you need $1,450 to enter this position. You are collecting a 1% return in 1 week with this position. $15 divided by 1,450 is just over a 1% return. So we start here. We sold our cash secured put. We collected $15 in premium for agreeing to buy 100 shares of SoFi at $14.50. One of two things can happen. First thing is you can either have the position expire worthless, meaning you're not forced to buy 100 shares. And that's what this node 1 here is. The position will expire worthless. You are not assigned if and only if SoFi, the price of SoFi is above $14.50 on that expiration date that we discussed earlier. That's kind of branch 1. So if SoFi stays above $14.50 by your expiration date, you have now returned 1.03% in literally 1 week. You put up the cash, the position was not assigned to you, it expired worthless, and guess what you can do right after this? You can repeat that whole process of selling an additional cash secured put the next week. So the beginning of the second week, you now have another $1,450 to sell additional puts with, and you profited $15 last week from entering the original cash secured put. Now the one everyone's scared of. SoFi drops below $14.50 before expiration. You get assigned, you now own 100 shares. And I know what you're thinking. That's a loss. It's not. Let me show you why. Scenario 2 is the stock drops below $14.50 at the time of expiration. In that case, you are going to be assigned, meaning you're going to be forced to buy 100 shares of SoFi if it reaches $14.50 or lower on that date. And you have to buy at that price no matter how low it might go. For example, if it goes to 12, you still have to buy at $14.50. That $14.50 will be used to buy 100 shares. Let me walk you through exactly what to do after this step, going into selling covered call options. So now you own SoFi at $14.50, but because of the premium you collected, your real cost basis is lower. And here's where the wheel earns its name. You're not just holding a stock hoping it goes up. You're selling a covered call on top of it. SoFi is now paying you to hold it. Now the one everyone's scared of. What if SoFi drops below $14.50 and you're forced to buy those 100 shares? You now own 100 shares of the stock. You're a shareholder. It's not a loss. The stock can recover higher when you hold the stock for a long enough period. The best part is you can start selling covered call options and collect additional premium just like you did with the cash secured put originally in that first week. So here in the beginning of that second week, I'm going to do the exact same thing to collect premium, except it's the exact opposite. So in this case, we now own 100 shares. I'm going to agree to sell the shares I now own at a higher price. So in this instance, if I take ownership of the shares, I can now agree to sell my shares, for example, at $15, right? That is a horrible dollar sign, at $15 instead of where my entry cost was at $14.50. Let me kind of go through that in Robinhood now. Make sure that sell call is selected at the top of the screen and make sure you have the expiration date set to a week. So for instance, this is the beginning of the second week. You now own 100 shares. The stock is about 50 cents to a dollar away from your entry cost of $14.50. So I'm going to show you an example where I'm going to sell a covered call option 50 cents above where the current market is trading. I'm going to choose the $16 strike price here. This is a more accurate example of what the premium might be on a regular week. So here I agree to sell my shares 50 cents higher than where the current market is trading at the 16 strike. I am collecting $40 upfront to agree to sell my shares at $16. I collect that $40 instantly. That is my payment to keep forever. One of two things can happen similar to the cash secured put. Let me explain. So I collected $40 for selling that covered call option at the $16 strike price just now. One of two things can happen similar to the cash secured put with the covered call option. First thing that can happen is the covered call expires worthless. And we're in this node here where the covered call expires worthless. You are not assigned on the covered call option, meaning the stock price at the expiration date is below my covered call strike price, which in this example was $16. When that happens, you keep that $40 premium and you're able to sell an additional covered call that following week in order to agree to sell your shares at $16 additionally. That's kind of scenario one. Scenario two is you can actually get assigned on your covered call option. And in this case, you're agreeing to sell your shares at $16 with that covered call option. In this case, the price of SOFI would be above $16 and you would have to sell at 16 no matter how high above 16 it may go. In this case, your stock gets called away. And basically what that means is your $1,600 you have in the stock value itself will actually be converted back into cash. So now that $1,600 is converted back into cash and you can actually restart the whole entire wheel strategy again. With that cash, you can sell an additional cash secured put and basically repeat the entire process we just talked about over and over and over again. Let me address the real fear. What if SOFI drops to $12 and just stays there? You're down on paper, but I'm not going to pretend you're not. But every single week you're selling a covered call, you're lowering your average cost basis. You're not stuck. You're getting paid to wait for the recovery. That's the whole point of the system. And you own the stock, you're in at $14.50. Let's say the stock drops to 12. In that case, you would continue to sell covered calls in this area here and continue to collect premium. This weekly premium of $40 you can collect every single week as you own the stock. So basically all you're doing is you're holding the stock long term like any normal investor would, but you're getting paid on a weekly reoccurring basis like a paycheck while you wait for the stock to recover. So yes, you have an unrealized loss in the stock itself with the stock going down to, let's say, $12 per share of $250, right? The difference between $14.50 and 12 is $2.50. That is not a real issue long term if you're confident in its recovery because like I said, you can collect these weekly premiums by agreeing to sell your shares at a higher price each week. This is the whole system. Every scenario has a plan. There's no outcome where you're just stuck doing nothing. You start by selling that cash secured put at $14.50. If it expires, you repeat the exact same thing over again and sell an additional cash secured put. If you are assigned 100 shares in this case, you now own those shares and can actually agree to sell a covered call option. In this case, we chose the $15 price as our example to sell that covered call at. You can choose a completely different price if you would want. The higher in price you go with the covered call option, the less premium you are going to receive because the likelihood of the stock reaching that higher price is a lower likelihood. And so one of two things can happen, right, with this covered call like we described. The covered call can either expire worthless, in this case you keep those 100 shares, or you can get assigned and you lose those 100 shares, in essence selling the 100 shares you have, and your stock gets called away. You basically restart the whole process over again at that point. That's the entire wheel, every scenario, every path, mapped out on a stock trading right now. No hypotheticals. If you want the full written breakdown on how I run this every week, comment guide down below and I'll send it straight to you. Or if you want to learn this one-on-one in more depth, comment the word call down below and I'll send you a completely free link to actually hop on a free intro session with me. We discuss your goals and exactly where you're trying to get to in your account.